Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm gonna be reacting to a video called A Super Quick History of Sweden, which is good because I don't know much about this country. I know that obviously they're in Scandinavia. It's very cold. They don't get much sunlight, and people are quite reserved. That's what I think. And there's some things about their food. That's the only thing I know. But I think this hopefully is gonna be like explained in a funny way because it's probably like an animated video. It looks like Mr. Peanut or something. So Mr. Monopoly. But I don't know. So let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
Hello everyone and
Okay.
This is Europe, and here's Sweden. Now let's go, shall we? Amidst the inviting meltings of the Ice Age, human beings trod into the terrain we know as Sweden. And a very nice-looking terrain it was, filled with forests and lakes and... Over time, the peoples of the Swedish lands, like those of Denmark and Norway, began speaking Germanic languages, which they still do. And while the Romans never made it to Sweden, they knew about the Swedes, and the historian Tacitus mentions them in his book Germania, neighboring tribes.
I'm surprised. Wouldn't they didn't came around at some point when Romans came to Sweden? Probably, obviously, this is a video, obviously they know, but or maybe it was them that came to like other places. I don't know, the Roman Empire was huge, so I don't know why that's surprising to me that they didn't make it to Sweden.
Tribes included the Geats and Goots and Goats, well, not the goats, who ended up fusing with the Swedes to form a single kingdom, though when and how this occurred is unknown. They also made cool stuff, like...
Because it was like that long ago that we just do not know. It's lost in the annals of history.
This helmet with eyebrows. Skipping on to the 8th century, the Viking Age arose, when the Northmen embarked on long, epic voyages of looting, massacre, conquest, and exploration. But while the Danes and Norwegians focused on westward seaborne journeys, the Swedes mostly followed waterways overland into Eastern Europe. Even so, Swedish...
Yeah, didn't the Swedes at some point came like to Germany, and I'm pretty sure that's the case. So I don't know if it was like around this time period, but I'm pretty sure they actually made it to like at least as far as Germany, and I know if Poland as well.
Swedish warriors took part in the Western raids too. Now, the Swedes proved such impressive fighters that the Byzantine emperors recruited them as elite military units and their own personal...
How they see, like, maybe that was what it was. But I was so mistaken. But like they made it like quite far. The Byzantine Empire was like quite far away from Sweden, so they managed to travel. I think it was the 9th century. Like that's such a long time ago.
Bodyguards known as the Varangian Guard. There were also a group of Swedes from Roslagen called the Rus, who came to rule over the Eastern Slavs and founded the powerful state of Kievan Rus.
Okay, so that's probably what I was referring to earlier. They made it to Russia? Okay.
From which Russia derives its name. That's right,
wow.
Russia is named after a bunch of...
Also, again, I don't know why I'm that surprised, because Finland at some point was part of Russia, right? Or no, it was Russia owned Finland. It was that, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like I think they look like further apart than what they actually are. History has taught us that, they're not that far away.
Swedes. Meanwhile, back home, Eric the Victorious got his name after winning this battle. His son, Olaf Konung, teamed up with Denmark to attack the Norwegians and partition Norway among themselves. Olaf was the first Swedish king to accept Christianity, a faith that spread further.
What they did like earlier on for religion? Were they just pagans or... Yes, because Christianity, yes. I was gonna say like maybe they were like Protestantism or something else, but that was later on, so they were just pagans.
During the long reign of his son, Swedes also began colonizing portions of neighboring Finland. This map of Scandinavia in the 12 and 1300s shows how things were looking back then. Around 1250, the future capital Stockholm was founded by an angry-faced nobleman. Hey, you'd be upset too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's like, it makes it, it's like, I'm not gonna upset someone born in like 1,000 years ago, but he's like, oh, and a very angry looking man. It's like, it's just like probably the only statue of him that survives, so it's kind of like a little sad. Probably he didn't even look like that, and he would be like, I didn't even look like that. That's just like the one sculpture that they made, and it didn't even resemble my face, so it is a little bit like, let's not judge.
With a hairstyle like that. Anyway, under Magnus IV, Sweden and Norway entered into a union that lasted for much of his reign, in which time the Black Death entered and devastated Sweden.
Yeah, the Black Death as in like devastated throughout all Europe. That was like what the fifth around the medieval ages, so like 1500s around that time period. I know that when I at least I know that when I think of this, I think of like, oh, it's mainland Europe, but obviously Sweden is also mainland Europe. But I'm thinking more of like other places because I think because Scandinavia is like so separated from a lot of like other places in Europe. It makes me like, oh, of course they also like saw the devastation, but you know, it made it over there, which I'm thinking it was maybe a good thing. Maybe there weren't that many deaths because they were so isolated that you know people just didn't actually go to travel there, so it didn't spread out that much. Maybe, I don't know.
Wiping out an enormous percentage of the population. Magnus was overthrown by Albert here, who himself ended up toppled and was followed by Margaret I of Denmark. Margaret instituted
The Delmas Tatar or something. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but isn't that like a very Icelandic name? I know that all the Iceland like names. I think it's last name. I think maybe, I don't know if it's the names or the last names in Iceland. They're like very like Dostir, or they end up like being spelled like that. So maybe they're related.
The Kalmar Union in 1397,
and obviously the one from Mecklenburg is also related to Germany as well.
in which Denmark, Sweden, and Norway were joined together under a single monarch. The union designed.
I like that. Yes, that's what I always say. Like, me not being from this place, I'm like, yes, of course, like they should just unite, which is good. And I'm surprised that it took that long, although, well, it didn't took that long. It was like 500 years, around 500 years to actually get together, because it's like, guys, you guys are like not the same, but you guys are pretty similar. You guys would be more powerful together.
Designed to challenge the might of the German economic powerhouse known as the Hanseatic League, was not very popular among the people of Sweden, and there was a rebellion in the 1430s. It failed, but the union was doomed. There was just too much resentment against Danish supremacy. The Danes responded rather.
Oh yeah, it's because they kind of like hate each other, like between them, which is it's a very sad, because again they're like, you guys would be more powerful. But obviously that's the case like throughout history, like people that are like neighbors, they just like hate each other because of like territory or something. But you know, sad.
Unwisely to this by executing many anti-union Swedes. The son of one of the murdered men, Gustav Vasa, led a rebellion against Denmark in which the Swedes were victorious, and Gustav Vasa became the king of Sweden. He was a.
What I'm getting here is also like Sweden and Denmark, like they've been foes throughout history, like they're the number one enemy.
Reformer who embraced the Protestant Reformation for much the same reason as Henry VIII did in England, to not have to answer to the Pope in Rome.
They wanted to get married, they wanted to have more wives, that's it.
His successor was an expansionist, and not just where facial hair was concerned. Eager to extend Sweden's domains, he joined the Poles in the Livonian War against Russia, and managed to acquire a bit of land. And then he went insane and was replaced by his half-brother with...
I love, he went insane, we'll just move past through this. It's like, okay, can you go back and explain to me how he went insane? In what ways? Like, actual insanity as in this day and age would be like, wow, this man should be institutionalized, or he went insane by the terms of like this day and age of where he was just probably like depressed or something.
His even grander beard. In this time, Denmark attempted to force Sweden back into union with it, and Sweden was like, yeah, nah, and many died and they didn't join, and everyone was worse off for the conflict. And speaking of conflict, there was plenty of that, which is a matter of course for anyone seeking to start an empire, which is what Sweden did. The man who launched Sweden into imperial spheres was Gustavus Adolphus, a highly capable commander whose militaristic innovation...
They all have the same kind of beard. I'm wondering if that was like, they were just being represented that way because the painter like the beards that way, or was that like in style in that time period? Is this like double beard? It's weird.
Have led some to label him the first modern general. He championed the Protestant cause in the 30 Years' War and won.
Isn't that like Napoleon? He was an emperor. He declared himself an emperor as well.
A resounding victory at the Battle of Breitenfeld. In a battle the following year, however, which the Swedes ended up winning, Gustavus was shot dead. He was succeeded by his daughter, Christina, who was as fond of books and knowledge as she was of hunting and wearing men's clothes. Having no desire to marry, she abdicated and was followed by her cousin, Charles X, who led Sweden to victory against both Russia and Denmark in the Second Northern War, during which the Swedes rampaged through Poland and caused immense destruction in a campaign called the Deluge. Charles XI inherited the Swedish Empire at its height, and after yet another war, oversaw a time of peace.
They had like 3 wars in the very short span.
Sweden's enemies, including Russia, arose to attack it in the Great Northern War.
Another War. It's so funny that they're all like the Great Northern War, the First Northern War, the Second Northern War. It's like, oh my god, how many wars are going to be? It's like, it's always the same name. Obviously, I don't know if that was like, it's sort of like the case of like the First World War, which was like the Great War, because obviously they didn't call it the First World War back in those days. They thought that was the war to end all wars. So it was like, it's just the Great War. And then after the second one came along, they were like, well, that was the first one.
Sweden was led by Charles XII, an extraordinary leader who in the Battle of Narva in 1700 led his men to victory over a Russian force 3 times the size of his own.
It's like, it's gonna be, obviously it's a present, it's a war, it's a battle, but it's kind of like tripping me out how all the paintings are like very snowy. It makes you like, yeah, it's the north, it's cold, and it's very snowy. Those people must have been like so miserable, not just because of the war, but also because of like the insane weather.
But then, some years later, he made a mistake Napoleon and Hitler would also make. He invaded Russia. Bad idea, catastrophe, thousands dead, Russia rises, Sweden declines. Empire over. Parliament thereafter did most of the governing.
Oh my god, that seriously, that ended the empire. That was it. Invaded Russia. Bad idea. Do not do it. The empire was lost. You know, that makes it like, maybe the others should have like actually follow along those steps and be like, well, you know, history has taught us it's never a good thing.
Until the monarchy's final absolutist roar arrived with Gustav III, who invested himself with immense powers and reigned as an enlightened despot until he was assassinated in 1792 at a masked ball. Meanwhile, Sweden had experienced a flourishing of science and culture. This rendition of the periodic table shows how many elements were discovered by Swedish scientists. 18, tied with Germany and second only to Britain. But
that's why they do the Nobel Prize.
Sweden had developed an unhealthy obsession with fighting Russia, and there was more war and...
What's up with Russia? Seriously?
Sweden lost Finland to Russia. Then a French guy became king of Sweden, and Norway too, after Sweden...
Can you explain why a French guy became the king of Sweden?
Took over Norway via a short war that would prove to be the last Sweden would ever fight, thereafter preferring neutrality. Meanwhile, as the 19th century stomped on, Sweden's population grew, and many emigrated to America, and industrialization slowly stamped its mark upon the nation. Norway broke away peacefully in 1905, and Sweden developed its renowned social...
That's extremely recent for someone to have an independence. That was what, almost 150 years. Well, around 100 years. I know it's more, but 100 years ago, that's like nothing. You know, like historically, that's nothing. And in people, this is like, can be easily like 2 generations.
Welfare system, and remained neutral during both World Wars and the Cold War. In 1995, Sweden joined the EU. A big bridge was built linking Sweden to Denmark, and the number of non-Swedes began to balloon.
I did not know that. You can, well, yeah, Denmark is the one that's separate. They have a bridge that connects them? That's awesome.
With a large spike occurring during the 2015 migrant crisis. Following the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, Sweden did something it avoided for many years, applied for membership in NATO. Anyway, today Sweden is one of the richest nations in the world, with a very high level of human development and high quality of life, and has also managed to produce excellence and noteworthiness in multiple fields, ranging from cinema and science to music and literature. So that's it for Sweden, and that's all from me for now. Bye-bye!
That moves is a jump scare. They need to stop. Okay, yes, this was very funny, very interesting. I do think I laughed, and it was very funny, but I think I learned a lot. You know, I would have loved to see a more in-depth video of like, because I have more questions than answers now. But because again, I'm like, hold on, go back to this. But obviously I know it's like, we're not doing like a history lesson here. But now I'm curious and I'm intrigued now. But it was very good. I think, again, it's like they had a lot of wars. I think that's probably like my takeaway from this. Obviously they expanded. All cultures and all kingdoms throughout history have done this, and all cultures wanted to expand, especially like obviously, you know, very, very early on in the dawn of like history and civilization. They wanted to obviously grab more territory and obviously like cause a lot of wars, but I think it was just like, it's crazy to me that even these days, like we have like the borders themselves, as in like Norway, Denmark, and not Finland, but you know, again, it's just another like landmass. But in general, you know, they're sort of like almost the same. I think it's kind of like crazy to me because it hasn't changed that much since like the year like 700. Which is, again, maybe I know that realistically, of course, they're not the same borders. The territory has changed, and especially like, for instance, Finland, like it belonged to them, belonged to the others. Norway as well. But, you know, as in like the whole, like from what I could see from the maps, it was something similar to what we have these days. So it is kind of like a little crazy to me if like, wow, it hasn't changed that much in like 1,000 years, because the territories, like they still differentiate from each other in sort of like a similar way, which I think it's crazy. Again, if I show you a map of like, I don't know, the Roman Empire, it's not clear, like it doesn't exist anymore. And again, it's not the same. Like there's like so many different countries that actually compose of, you know, what it was used to be the Roman Empire back in the day. But in here, it's like, it's not that much. It's not that dissimilar, which I'm like surprised about. I'm wondering if also like the harsh conditions, like the weather made it so that people would just like, we're not going there. Like they were all like, the wars were between each other, as in like Norway and Denmark. Not Norway. I think Norway was just like, we want to be separate, and that's it. But I think the final, like the first couple of wars were with Denmark specifically, and there was like the wars with like Russia and the thing about Finland. But I'm wondering if like why other places, and I think at some point, yes, they invaded, but they wanted to like invade other places, but other places in Europe were not like coming to them, except for like a few noted like exceptions. So it's weird. Why did like the kingdom of, I don't know, France didn't want to like invade them? There was a kingdom, yes, there was a kingdom of France, but you know what? Why, or the kingdom of Spain? Why didn't they want to like invade them? Was it like, again, we can't really go there? I don't know. It's kind of like interesting to me, but it's like we're not getting into like the historical reasons. But I do like the fact that obviously it's very interesting, very rich history. But yes, they got into like so many wars, and then at one point we're like, this is it, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. And seriously, we stuck around during the First World Wars. Like it was just in recent times where they sort of like broke it down a little bit. And said, well, yeah, desperate times call for like desperate measures. But it's insane to me how they managed to remain neutral in the world, in the first two wars, because those were, and probably, I don't know, the Cold War, maybe I can give it a more leeway because it wasn't like active conflict. But in like the First and Second World War, they were like, wow, you remain neutral? How did they manage to do that? But again, maybe it's because they were so isolated that it's like, well, it's easy if you're not like that, if you're a little bit farther from the zones of conflict. But, you know, in recent years, I think definitely probably the immigration as well, like they mentioned, like it has gone up, and now a lot of like Swedes, actually like born Swedes there, that have parents from other places, and, you know, their parents are immigrants, and there's just like a lot of immigrants in general. And I'm wondering if that has changed like their outlook and their perspective of like, we actually have to be more involved in like in the war, not in wars, hopefully that they don't really occur, or they occur less these days, but just like in general, as in like conflicts and just general conflicts that occurred, you know, in life and in other parts of the world, maybe like being more open to immigrants have changed their perspective. I'm wondering if that's related, but you know, I don't know, that's maybe like what that I'm like very intrigued about. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.